All right. Hi, everybody. Okay. Yeah, so we'll get started. It is a minute after. All right. So I have a question to open this up. All right. I have a question to open this up. How many of you have heard the song "Battlefield" by the immortal Jordan Sparks? We got one hand, two hands. And how does that song make you feel? Honestly.
Fantastic.
Really? Oh, sorry. Allison, how does it make you feel? It's a struggle, right? It's a struggle. And the only reason why I bring this up is because this song got in my head after we came up with the title over and over, because it kind of sounds like, body field, body field, body field. I just can't get it out of my head. So hopefully it's out of my head after today.
Don't worry, it won't be.
Yeah, I hope. All right. Anyway, I'm Brandon. I'm the front-end developer for PRI, Public Radio International. We are headquartered here in downtown Minneapolis. And with me, who will also be speaking today, are two developers from Four Kitchens. We have Patrick, who's all the way from Austin, Texas. So hook 'em horns, right? No. All right. And we also have Jeff from Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I just have to say, Jeff has saved my butt a few times in the past, so I'm grateful for that. And Patrick's also a wonder kid, too. So there we go. All right. And so also this is our first time to Minneapolis, and the true north. So I think they're enjoying it. All right.
North of normal.
Okay, so this session contains 4 parts. I'll start by mentioning what we at PRI were trying to achieve through adding contextual content through the body field. Jeff will show you how PRI collaborated with Four Kitchens to come up with an innovative solution to this problem. Patrick will present our open source solutions, which are the Entity, Embed, and Charts.js modules. And finally, I will close with a few UX tips to help you better engage your users. So we should have plenty of time for questions at the end, where we run at about just over half hour, so that should give plenty of time, so save them for the end, please. So let's get into it. So in case you're not familiar with PRI, we are a global nonprofit media organization focused on the intersection of journalism and engagement to affect positive change in people's lives. It's kind of a mouthful, but it's on our About Us page if you want to look it up. And our website is pri.org, and we are built on Drupal 7. And also, so I don't confuse you, we are not NPR, and we are not American Public Media, who's based in St. Paul. Sometimes we're confused. But they are, in fact, our friendly competition, or if you will, frenemies. And so since our goal at PRI is for our users to do more than just read stories, we applied for, and with a bit of help from Four Kitchens, won a Knight Foundation prototype grant to build out a tool we have called Story Act. And it is based on 3 assumptions. First, if our stories are compelling, people want to take a step deeper into the story. Second, if we make it easy and obvious, putting clear and relevant actions into the flow of the story, users will click. And lastly, if journalists are involved with selecting these steps, they will adapt more easily to adding this layer to their stories. So to sum up, our desire was to create a tool that could put any content into the body field where we wanted it, when we wanted it, and that our editors felt was easy to use. So that sounds easy, but it's harder than you think, and some may even say it's a battle, which is a bad pun based on the title. So there you go. Okay, so I remember DrupalCon Austin listening to Jeff Eaton's Battle for the Body Field talk, and he talked about placing content blobs and blobs, and mostly explained how tools in Drupal aren't sophisticated enough when dealing with this issue. And this has been our experience at PRI as well, and that's part of the reason why we're borrowing his title for this talk within it. And so with that in mind, there are a few Drupal approaches you can take to help you. You can create a panel or a block and then assign it filters for display, but that leads to a really hairy admin that's really messy. And you can also like inject JavaScript and move things around based like that. We do that on our ad strategy. Like if you visit our site with mobile devices, you'll see our ad placement's different than on the desktop. So we do JavaScript there, but it's not something you want to do when you're on a deadline and across the board quickly for like little different things like a newsletter block, stuff like that. So actually in that talk, what Eaton recommended was a module called Node Embed. And it allows you to embed other content fairly easily in the body and assign them view modes. But it's not really as effective for like non-nodes or the entities. So like if we wanted to put our newsletter subscription block anywhere within the body, that is much more difficult to do. And Patrick will kind of go into the Node Embed module a little bit later. So really what we wanted didn't exist yet. And so we knew we had to build it, and I knew personally that I wasn't going to be able to build it myself. So fortunately, Four Kitchens was there the whole time to think this tool through and to help us build it. And really all I gave them to start with was a single wireframe of how a few of the actions would look when it was rendered. But I didn't provide them much more than that. Like I had an idea in my head of like a suggested workflow to work for like editors working through it, but I didn't know specifically like how our WYSIWYG editor, our CK editor would handle that. So we basically gave them a list of varied and sometimes changing use cases, and we iterated a bit, and it seemed to work out. So Four Kitchens built a wonderful tool, and I will say that they are fantastic to work with. Like everything Todd mentioned in the keynote has been my experience working with Four Kitchens, like all that, like transparency and honesty, and also with the agile development process. I haven't participated in a process like as a paying client, like it actually worked. Like sometimes it's tough to have an agile process work when someone's paying for all the meetings, but it does work, trust me. And but before I turn this more into a commercial for them, I'm going to turn this over to Jeff.
Thanks, Brandon. So hi, I'm Jeff. I'm an engineer at Four Kitchens. I've had the good fortune of working with Brandon on this and a number of smaller projects over the last year and a half or so. I'm just going to talk about our relationship with PRI, kind of how it evolved and what I think made it successful. In particular, what allowed our two teams to work together efficiently and effectively. But before I do that, I'd like to take a moment, recognize other web chefs involved in this project. I've tastefully represented them here on their screen by their floating heads. In addition to Patrick and myself handling development, Mike Minetsky was the architect. Mike's in the front row here. Provided DevOps support as well. Karis Hurd consulted on user experience. Paul Benjamin was the project manager, and Ceci Correa handled client relations. So, Four Kitchens' relationship with PRI began when they hired us to provide support development for their brand new Drupal 7 site. During that time, we were providing support. Their ideas for the website kept evolving. They came up with some really great ideas, how to better engage their audience, and Four Kitchens provided some assistance in their pursuit of a grant that would help fund these ideas. Specifically, a Knight Foundation grant for Story Act. Well, ultimately, PRI won the grant, hired us to develop Story Act, and as well as some additional functionality. So this work would be performed by a blended PRI Four Kitchens team, with us focusing on project management, UX consultation, architecture, and back-end development. PRI, namely Brandon in this case, would handle design and theming in-house. So every project has its challenges. Ours was no different. There were a number of concerns on both sides going in. Common to both was whether our blended team would gel enough to keep the project on track. For PRI specifically, some concerns were, I think they had an inkling that their wish list was larger than their budget. Would they be able to get all of, or most of what they had hoped for? They had healthy skepticism of web development shops. I don't know why. And were concerned about our ability to respect their budget constraints and plan accordingly. They wondered, would there be open communication between Four Kitchens developers, or would they feel disconnected from the development process and decisions involved in it? In a nutshell, they desired transparency and were concerned they wouldn't get it. On our side, we had some concerns as well. Their wish list was larger than their budget. How could we deliver most of the important features that they wanted? Since most stories required a handoff to Brandon to finish up theming tasks prior to going into QA, would he be able to complete them in addition to his regular PRI work? PRI.org's general manager, Michael Scholar, wanted to be the product owner. We wondered if he would have the bandwidth in his busy schedule to do things like QA, Scrum rituals, make key decisions, etc. And also, due to their tight budget, PRI wanted to minimize its use for discovery, and so they could focus more of that budget towards development. As a result, we had few wireframes to work from when building new features, and we wondered, would this lead to inefficiency and unmet expectations? So, I mean, going through this, it probably paints an unrealistic picture of the mood at the beginning of the project, because I think we were all feeling positive and excited. But at the same time, I think these feelings were palpable in the undercurrent. But that was so the project's been finished for 6 months now. Flash forward to now, I think I feel exceptionally proud of how these concerns were addressed and handled, and also of the product we developed together. There were some hiccups along the way, but once we settled into our roles, agreed on expectations, and hit our stride, I think both sides were able to gain trust and feel like we were on a path to success. So what helped us succeed, and how did we define success? First and foremost, I think providing the transparency PRI desired and receiving the same from them in return helped make this a true partnership. But what exactly did this mean in practice? Well, there were candid and ongoing conversations surrounding scope and budget. This allowed PRI to have a sense of where we were in the project, adjust expectations, and communicate to us what was most important to them and where we should focus our efforts. We provided detailed reports of how the budget was being spent to conform with PRI's internal reporting requirements. Quick surfacing of potential pitfalls led to discussions early and often about alternatives or compromises before we got too deep into the development of any one feature. There was a general willingness on both sides to try new things and adapt, and this allowed us to iterate on our processes and make adjustments to streamline them. And lastly, ownership of mistakes and celebration of successes allowed each of us to feel invested in the project, accountable to its outcome, and part of a unified team. We communicated a lot, and we valued it and we made time for it. And Brandon was a superstar here. Our concerns about process bottlenecks were never an issue. In fact, quite the opposite. He was such an effective conduit for communication between the dev team and the product owner that questions were answered quickly and feedback was delivered promptly. He also held a lot of knowledge about the features and how users would interact with them, both as consumers and content editors. Admittedly, the structure of this project was a lot looser in some ways than we would have preferred. Having someone like Brandon as a key contact with the client was essential to making this workable. Good job, Brandon. So, and lastly, an important marker of success for any project we work on is our ability to contribute something useful back to the open source projects. Partnering with a client that recognizes the importance of giving back and the value they receive from the hard work of everyone who has contributed to the open source solutions they're using, that's awesome. And I'd like to thank PRI for allowing this work to be open sourced and encourage you to thank them as well. So I'm going to hand this off to Patrick. We're going to get into the meat of this. And Patrick did the bulk of the development for the Story Act part of this project. He's going to dive deeper into that. He's also going to discuss our tricked out charting module that we built for PRI.
Thanks, Jeff. So, hey everybody. Like Brandon mentioned earlier, I'm Patrick, Four Kitchens, and today I'm going to talk to you about the open source contributions that we were able to make throughout this project, and some of the tools that we built to accomplish the things that we need to do. One of the things that makes Drupal a really amazing tool is all of the really useful, stable, well-maintained modules that are available that other companies have spent a lot of time, other individuals have spent a lot of time and money making these things. And we use these open source modules to create a functioning site. And so what we wanted to do is take some of these tools that we had created to sort of fill the gaps between these open source modules and recontribute them and give back to the community. So this was a really important goal for this project. It was part of the funding that we got, and it was a goal that both PRI and Four Kitchens had. And we were able to meet this goal. We created and released 2 Drupal modules, Chart.js for Drupal and Entity Embed, both of which I will talk about now. So the first module that we released was called Entity Embed, and it solved an interesting problem. So Brandon mentioned earlier that Jeff Eaton uses Node Embed to insert rich media into stories or body fields, basically. And this works really well, except for the fact that you can't insert any type of entity. You can only insert nodes, which if you are into Drupal, that can be sort of a blocker if you have just some random type of entity, like a taxonomy term, that you want to throw into the body field. And so Node Embed also was not really that pluggable. We couldn't change it to make it do what we wanted it to do, especially as far as like editorial interfaces go. So we decided to just build our own alternative to this. So Entity Embed was our solution for this. Entity Embed is actually really similar to Node Embed at its core, but it works with all entity types from the get-go, and it provides a lot more opportunity to extend Entity Embed. The embed code is really much like Node Embed's embed code. All you have to do is provide an entity ID and an entity type, and then you can render a node or any type of entity with that. And then you can add any amount of custom parameters that you want after these two things exist. So you can pass context from the body field into the template that's being used to render this entity within the body. And one of the really cool things we wanted to do with Entity Embed is we wanted to make it really easy for editors to use. So with Node Embed, right, you'd have to basically type out a shortcode or use some sort of like really kind of strange abstract generator. There was a lot of language used in the process of creating these shortcodes that was really sort of technical and didn't lend itself towards being easy for editors to use. So we worked really hard to make sure that this would be really intuitive and useful. So one of the things that we did, we made these embed codes clickable. And when you click on these embed codes, an editorial form will come up that allows you to see the entity that's being embedded and allows you to modify any of the properties that belong to that entity. And then you can change those properties, submit it, and the embed code will update accordingly. And this was really powerful because all of a sudden this sort of like abstract code was all of a sudden clickable, and you could see what was being put into the body, which is really helpful when you're trying to write a story and make it look good. The other thing that was really cool that we did is we changed the interface that was used to select entities. And so if you go up here and you click one of these buttons up there and you want to add an entity embed code, the thing that lets you select which entity you want to embed is powered by views, and you can change what view it's using really easily. So if you wanted to provide your own filter tools or anything like that, then you're free to do that. You can do anything you want. And also, if you'll notice, the visual styling of this embed code is very distinct. And so when you look at this text, it's text. It's really easy to read. But this blob of code, you know that it's code. You know that it's there, and you don't have to go read through and try to find it. It doesn't look like the other stuff. It stands out. It's very present in the editorial form, just like it will be present on the rendered version of this. And so a problem that we really tried to solve with this as well was the fact that you don't want to always just render the same thing the same way all the time. Sometimes a story is styled differently. Sometimes the context of the story means that you want to use different colors and style the embedded entities differently at different points. And so what we needed to do is we needed to be able to allow editors to change the way that an embedded thing looked. And so we created this mechanism that allowed people like Brandon to define stylistic settings for embed codes. And like you can see up there, there's a border, alignment, icon, background. You can change these things just by opening up this form and selecting, yellow, right? And you can press OK, and it will apply it to the shortcode that you're applying it to. And then when you save this and render it, you will see that the stylistic stuff that you changed here will be reflected. And this is really powerful. It allowed them to sort of tweak these embedded rich media blobs to where they're optimized for user engagement, to where they stand out just enough but don't look like an ad. It allowed editors to have real control without having to write custom CSS or do all this complicated stuff. And it allowed Yeah, and it basically made like embed codes really stable, configurable but stable at the same time, and that was really, really powerful. So the PRI entity embed module, it's great. We use it. It's still being used. But there's a new entity embed module that you all should pay attention to because it is really cool. Before we started this project, this module didn't exist, and so if this module had existed when we started this project, we would have used it. Basically, the Drupal media team has recently been doing a lot of work towards making Drupal media systems and embeddable stuff much more usable by developers and editors. And so this is a really good tool, and I would suggest that you use this over the PRI entity embed module. That being said, there are some things that we built into the embed module that don't exist within this module, so what we're probably going to do in the near future is take those things and add it as an extension module that modifies this thing because it's very pluggable and very good, or fork it and patch it. We'll see. That's to be decided, but we want to add some of the improvements that we built to this as a better way to share it with other people. So the second thing that we worked on and open sourced was a Chart.js library for Drupal. So one of the things that was really useful for engaging people in different stories was polls. It asks a user a question. Users like answering questions. People love to give input. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to tell people how polls were looking in their results after they submitted an answer to the poll. And we needed to do that with the chart. And we needed to do that and make it elegant and make it easy for editors to decide how that chart should look and what type of chart it should be. And there were a couple of chart libraries available for Drupal that we sort of tried to use, but at some point or another, they just didn't do what we needed, or they were kind of ugly. And so we decided to build our own. And we decided to use Chart.js, which is available at chartjs.org. Very nice library, very well animated, just very easy to use and good. So there's already a Chart.js module for Drupal on Drupal.org, but it doesn't really do anything. It's just a wrapper for the JavaScript library. You could just install this module and throw the Chart.js module onto the libraries folder, and there you go, you're all set. You can define charts on the front end, but it's not very useful if you want to create charts as a form submission callback, right? Because you can't create a chart in PHP. So we decided to sort of deviate from that. This module didn't do really anything, so we created our own. And this Chart.js module does a number of things. First off, it allows you to pull the Chart.js library into Drupal. That's really basic. But this other thing it does is it allows you to define and set all of the global variables that are available within Chart.js. So you can take the color of charts, the default colors, whether or not they have templates that show this amount of people said no, this amount of people said yes. The legend of a chart lets you change the styling of that and the template that renders that. Pretty much everything related to the chart, you can set a global default for that. And we provided an interface within Drupal that lets you do that. All the settings are overridable within the API, and if you choose to change a setting on a specific chart, that's really easy to do as well. And another thing to mention is all of the naming conventions for the administrative interface that lets you do this match directly with the names of the parameters on chartjs.org, so you automatically have good documentation. So this was really good. We were able to render charts on the front end and configure those charts within Drupal. But the really powerful thing that we were able to do was render a chart on the server side. So as you might be able to see this function down here, which is just a little snippet of code. This will render a chart for you. It will do the stuff necessary to get data, pass it to Chart.js, and render it automatically without having to write any JavaScript or CSS or templating or anything. So first is the chart type, the first parameter. The second one is an array of data that you want to be in the chart. The third is the chart ID. Fourth is an array of options that override those global options. And the fifth and the sixth are width and height. That's all you need. You can pass this to a render function in a template, and you've got a beautiful chart. And so this Chart.js module is available on GitHub under the PRI GitHub account, and so you can pull that off at any time. And you can use it. And if you have anything to say about it, let us know in the issue queue. So like I mentioned, we really wanted to give back to the Drupal community by releasing these 2 Drupal modules, and we hope that other people, that you all are able to use them. And if you have any questions about it or want to find it, go to the PRI GitHub account, submit an issue, download it, fork it, anything you want to do. But you're free to use them, and we hope that you enjoy them. And with that, I'd like to pass it back to Brandon to talk about other things. Thanks, you.
Thank you, Patrick. And perhaps you might be thinking now, okay, I've seen enough of the back end of this. Now, what does this look like in the front end? Like, give me an example already. So I'm here to give you that example. So many of you may have been aware of like the recent earthquakes that happened in Nepal. And so, it was pretty devastating, and there's like a need, or there's like a desire of people from the US to help people in Nepal who had suffered. So one of our editors created a story where they listed 10 vetted charities that were on the ground in Nepal. So like your money would count if you gave to them. And this story took off. And what the nice thing about Story Act was we were able to enhance the story with call-outs and related links that simply added to the coverage. And what was really cool about the story, and like the story like fits our overall mission of getting people deeper into the story, is that it led to 11 out of the blue donations to PRI just because of the quality and honesty and helpfulness of the story. So that was pretty cool. And that's never happened before, I can tell you that. Like, we struggle to get donations out of people. We try and squeeze you, public radio, right? Anyway, no. I didn't say that. And so, yeah, so it's really just an example of who we want to be as a journalistic organization. And so, moving into the UX portion of it, I feel like it would be quite inappropriate of me to say, hey, here's a tool you can do practically anything you want with inside the body field, now go get them. This tool yields enormous power, but we intended it for it to be a Swiss Army knife and not a machete. So wield your power responsibly. And so with that, I'm going to share with you a few tips that for which you can create successful actions on your own site, whether you're a journalistic site or not. Are we stopped?
No, it's
No.
the title screen's up there.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know.
Oh,
There it goes. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Dan. So once the tool was in place, we hired a journalist into the World's newsroom for 3 months. And he was dedicated to adding and analyzing actions and conducting interviews with our users. And so he ended up personally adding 85 actions to roughly 50 stories that we officially analyzed. We've done many more since. And we also analyzed the actions using Google Event Trackers and Crazy Egg heat maps. In addition, we had a Facebook focus group of 18 loyal users of our site to provide feedback. And much of what we learned boils down to KISS, or keep it simple, stupid. And I know you're probably sitting there going, well, duh. But I work with journalists, and they like to be wordy. And so this is always a good reminder to them to not be wordy. So because our first lesson is, the more simply an action is worded, the better it performs. And we also tested whether the total number of actions per story affected engagement. And initially went into this thinking that if we'd want to add like 3 to 5 actions per story, but we've quickly learned that stories with fewer number of actions perform better than stories with 3 or more. In that regard. And also, if you remember back to Patrick's portion, he mentioned how we added a feature to the tool where the editor can select from a few preset design styles, like having a border, background color. But however, the Facebook group kept saying that the actions look too much like ads. So we actually went through the process of making them look simpler. And it also means that ad blindness is real. So don't let anything important on your site look like an ad. Especially when you have advertising on your site, like we do. Or, excuse me, underwriting. A few other tips is users love to vote. Our most popular actions consisted of polls and stories. I mean, that's I mean, submitting a poll response, that's simple to do. There isn't much of a barrier of entry for the user there. As far as location goes, top is better than bottom. So don't bury your most important action. A lot of times you'll see, like on news sites specifically, like they'll put that action like at the end of the body. I would argue don't do that. Hit them up earlier because people don't make it to the bottom of your stories. And lastly, the Facebook group also noticed that when a story was more personal in nature, the actions associated with the story felt more natural. So really that's just a reminder to be relevant to your content and be relevant to who your organization is. So that ends the formal presentation of this talk. We hope you feel better prepared in your own battle against the body field. So our contact information is on the screen above. Feel free to reach out to any one of us if you have any questions, or we can answer your questions now because we have plenty of time. So, yes.
Did you experience any caching issues with like polls or?
Absolutely. Yes.
Like, do you have to hole punch for that, or do you have to say let it be cached for certain items?
Patrick, why don't you come over here by the mic?
Yeah, absolutely. So caching was actually kind of a problem that was really annoying. So we cached everything, Akamai, and like was it Varnish? And so there were cached versions of these pages, and we had these interactive pieces of rich media embedded into these stories. And so what we had to actually do is when we had this piece of interactive media that somebody could, submit stuff to and get responses from, or basically anything that was supposed to change within the session, the browser session, we had to do an AJAX request and load things explicitly without refreshing the session or clearing the cache, and just insert them into the page. And one thing that we made note of is to make sure that we implement the form API stuff, because when you're asking for user input, usually that's in the form of an actual HTML form, and if you use the form API, it's actually pretty convenient to get results. And back to the chart.js stuff, rendering charts server side, all you have to do is change a couple lines of code to make it AJAX friendly, and you're good to go. So that was an annoying problem we had to deal with, but it was a pretty simple fix.
Matt, I'm going to regret this. What's your question?
Chart.js library is not.
Say that again?
The chart.js library is not. You guys can all see it because you're part of your
Oh.
but that's me.
Get rid of the S in charts. It's just.
You only have one library that's not appropriate.
All right. Well, I'll double check that quick. Any other questions?
Thanks, Matt.
It exists. Believe us, it exists. I'll have to double check that.
Did a lot of work to document it, so it's there.
Yeah.
How have you found, with the journalists who are inputting stories and things, are you doing any testing, and how's that going for them putting in those short codes? I really like what you did with the interactive, click it and bring it up and stuff. Is that going well? Or
Yeah, no, it's going pretty well because the editor doesn't actually physically create the shortcode themselves. The shortcode is generated.
Right.
So are
they just picking you?
Here's how it sort of looks.
who wants a live demo?
You press
Yes.
a button, and it brings up a list of nodes, and you click one, and it's there. You're done.
Okay.
Resolve that.
How are you doing? Are you using taxonomies for that to contextualize between? Okay, well this might be related.
No, honestly, it's just a view that displays that list of nodes, and so you can provide as many filters and things as you want. You can customize that to whatever you need for your specific site.
Where'd it go?
We didn't do any taxonomy things, but you could definitely do that if you want to.
Okay.
Can you get into Chrome?
Yeah,
See
no,
what-
Sounds good.
Okay. There you go.
Let me do a shared screen instead of a dual thing,
Yeah.
because you'll need control over this thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
But to answer the question, how do our editors like it? They seem to like it.
They're doing it. So
They're doing it, yeah, and they continue to do it, and they keep doing it.
Good,
And
that's the key.
I keep getting bothered less and less about it too. So that's also a good sign.
Right.
No, that's good, and they're seeing the effectiveness of it too, because what the in it. So I'm going to log into our staging server here because I can get to it quick.
Check it out. I don't have that lock on.
There's my extremely secure password.
Goes off the screen a little bit there.
Okay. Yeah, I'll pull it over. Here.
I think it goes off on the sides.
I got it. I'll just do a smaller screen. Okay, so let's do this. So if I go back to the home page here, and this is just a really slow testing environment, so forgive it. Here we go. So if we go into this story, and if you don't know who FIFA is, this story is a really good primer. And we use the Workbench editorial suite to do states. So we go through. Okay, so within the story here, we have our body field. I'll zoom up a little bit. And this one doesn't have any story acts in it. But a few ways you can add story acts, or the entity embed. You need to come over again. Here.
If you just make it smaller.
I'm trying to make it smaller.
No, the actual thing is like.
Yeah, drag it over. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. So what I can do is I have these set of icons here at the end. So if I want to create one, I can press this box, and we have it set up so that I could do like internal links, external links, a poll, custom text, newsletter, meetup widget. So in this case, I'll do a poll because that's what you're all curious about. I can see it. We can categorize it. That's just internal categorization. And then I give it a title. And one of the nice things is this title is set up so that it also gives you a Google event tracker automatically based on the title. So we can go back in analytics and track that later. Grant money is a wonderful thing.
And just a quick note on this. This is another thing that we didn't really mention, but you can create and embed a node at the same time within one form. As opposed to like creating it and going across the whole site, finding where you want to embed it and embed it. That's kind of a pain. So we just made this thing work.
Yeah. So like I can create a poll here. So we have a question. Does this work? And their answers are yes, and then I'll choose my color. We'll add another item. No, you guys stink. All right. Chart type, and then this is where you can select type of chart we want, and then you can save it. And so when this finishes saving, it brings me back to the story act creation. I can add a teaser if I wanted and things like that. So I can save it. And the poll is like the most involved steps of these. So now we have our token. It's automatically generated. If you see I hover over it, you can click it. When I click it, it goes right back into edit. So that's easy for our editors to go through and then edit the contents of it. If I highlight it, this is where I can go in and add the different styles. So we can give it a border, we'll align it right, give it an engagement icon. So really those are just custom CSS classes it's adding to the wrapper. And like Patrick said, there's another content type that controls those, so I can add them as I want them. And background, we'll do yellow because we're shouting. Fine. That's a standard case of background color. Like, I need to take those away from our editors because they're abusing them a little bit. So it's a note to self. But when we save the draft, you'll see here, eventually, we'll wait a little bit. There we go. That wasn't too bad. So now we added it in. There it is. So now we have our poll. So it worked. And so now when we save, now we see we have one vote. So you guys can actually all go into this story now. We don't actually I should knock people out of our staging server. But, so that was the poll module there.
Yeah,
So we can add more, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one quick note. The pull stuff that's available for Drupal is tragic. It actually doesn't work very well. It doesn't let you do very many things as far as like looking into it and changing the way that it works. It's also like the way it stores data is really bad. And so we sort of built our own poll system with different entities, kind of like put that together. But hopefully eventually we'll be able to like make some sort of better solution for this. But that's when he was going to the field and clicking the add button. He was creating another entity,
Yeah.
referencing it.
So we also have this button, so now we can go back and reference it and reuse it on different stories. So actually I have a drop down of all my content types. It went away again. It comes back. Let's see if it comes back. There it is. Okay. So now I've added that in, and here I can embed it. And another thing I should mention is that in order to get ready for this, to put actions left, to put actions right, as well as like our images and stuff like that, I had to like completely redesign our story page so that it's more of like a single column. Because right rails, they don't test well anyway. So I'd actually encourage you to get rid of your sidebars from a theming perspective. But we'll just let this one go. So if I save this, there. So that's kind of an overview of what this is. So there, I didn't set any style, so it just stays in the middle. It's a link. There's a link tracker on here. We're set. So, yeah, that's that. Any other questions?
Was it customized or was it a module?
It's a module we wrote. Mainly Patrick wrote and Jeff edited, and I just made sure it worked.
And that's available?
Yes, it's available. Let me see. I'll try and solve this here. So GitHub/Public Radio International.
There you go.
It's entity embed. So entity embed is here.
Yeah.
So you can follow that link, and then we also have charts.js, which you said my link was wrong up there.
Yeah, but I have access to it, so and I'm logged in.
There it is. Chart.js. There it is.
Go. Hey, scroll down to the documentation. I've spent so much time on this. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Scroll slower.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Any other questions?
You said this one will be made public.
It should be public. I thought I made it public. If not, I'll have it public.
It's still private.
Oh, it's still private. I'll make it public like in 2 minutes. Yeah.
Is there any way to know, since all these entities are created in line, whether they are actually still relevant or used anywhere else on the site? I mean, I can imagine people creating a lot of these, polls and other embeddable entities, and then never using them, and then they're just kind of hanging out with your site.
Yeah.
Is there any way to know that this entity is used inside this content type? Anything like that?
Not easily, no.
That's something that actually wasn't there like a task that was related to that?
Well, there is I mean, I've tried to set up some like admin views that try and filter for that a little bit. So, yes, I did set up kind of a view for that now that I remember. But
yeah, you could do like fuzzy text search for the entity embed stuff, or you could also just create a very simple table that has like a one-to-one relationship between IDs. The latter probably being the most performant solution on the reading end, but that does require a little bit. It requires another insert when you're actually creating an embed, which is something we didn't really want to get into at the time.
So it's loading. There you go. So that's kind of, this is a view I started. I thought I had it a little more complete than this, but it tells me any story at least where there is a story act. But yeah.
I can spit that out pretty later.
Yeah.
Like counts and stuff on it. Cool.
That would be cool. Yeah, so I just did body contains for the wrapper div. So I will say one thing that's been a little challenging with the story acts is because a lot of time that's information that's only relevant to our site. We do a lot of, our content does get passed to a lot of different sources like MSN.com or through feeds. There's like a public media API that the information gets passed out to. So we do actually strip this content from our feeds. From that, so it's not, so yeah, so if it needs to get passed on, then it needs to be within the regular body and not within one of the tokens. But otherwise, if you don't manually strip it out, all that stuff would go to the feeds. And then you get calls from the people receiving those feeds going, we don't know how to display this. So.
If you did also track which entities contained entity embed codes and what they were referencing, you could also just replace the entity embed code with a hard link to what was embedded and just like make a note like this is rich content that was embedded on PRI.org to the content here, and then you would go to that page and you could render it.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Do you just let that story sit there, or do you purge it like 30 days or 60 days?
All of our stories are there indefinitely. So we want to have a archive of all of our content. So I don't know what node number we're up to now, but it's quite a bit. I think we're in the 90,000s of nodes. And we just started the site, what was it, 2 years ago? About a year and a half.
Does that all just stay in the database, or is
Yeah.
it like an archive? No, it's just there.
It's there. I mean, our next step is we have to go through the process of decoupling and going headless. So that is our next step. So we do want to get a JSON API of our story content for sure. It'd be beneficial. Yeah. Good questions.
Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is fantastic.
Yeah. So I believe you have the coffee break now, so you can beat the line there. So thank you guys.